Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Chat EbT. I'm your host, Mohammed Ebrahim Tayob. My guest today is a broadcaster, a journalist, a sports scientist, and that's just naming a few. Please help me in welcoming Stacey Holland. Stacey, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I love the setup you guys have here.
No, thank you. So, Stacey, I'm actually terrified because I feel like I'm not going to do your story a little bit of justice, right? So, give us a bit of an introduction about who you are and where are you at the moment.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm probably the quintessential definition of a jack of all trades.
Yep.
But I'm glad that it's the master of none doesn't apply to me.
Brilliant.
I try to master everything that I get involved in. But if we're to start all the way from the beginning, I suppose, my academic background is in sports science, exercise physiology, the sports side of things. And then I ended up working in corporate in a number of roles. Ultimately, I think I'm just a curious person that is interested in quite a few industries and, quite a few sort of avenues in life. So TV presenter, entrepreneur, and sports scientist is the best way to wrap it up, I suppose.
I love it, man. So let's go back to your TV career, right?
Yeah.
So obviously you've done everything from, current affairs presentations to sports to lifestyle and culture. Where did it all start? So what was the passion of going into the TV and journalism industry?
When I was younger, I always wanted to be in television. Everyone used to say to my parents, oh my gosh, you should get this girl on a stage. I was never afraid to speak to anyone. I think it was because of my nomadic childhood. I lived between South Africa, Eswatini, it was Swaziland obviously at the time, Zimbabwe. I was born in Zimbabwe. My dad is South African, but ended up spending quite a bit of time outside of South Africa.
Oh, wow.
So that nomadic childhood allowed me to be very at ease with, new people, speaking to different people, different cultures, and I was very curious from a young age. So I always wanted to be in television, but the opportunity only came after university, and it's quite a cool story. I was at just a dinner with a friend. I was studying sport management and human movement studies at the time, and it was a work dinner, and I happened to be seated next to one of the editors at ENCA. It was called the E-News channel at that point in time. She knew she could seat me there because I can speak to anybody, and so naturally, he was a guy, and I always gravitate towards sports, but I always know that sport is a great icebreaker with most men.
Definitely.
So we ended up chatting about sports, and he was like, oh, your knowledge is quite good. We're looking for sport anchors on E-News. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. But I thought, oh, he's saying that. That was like the Thursday. The Tuesday, he called me and he's like, you have a screen test this coming week. And I was like, what? Are you being serious? And Deborah Patter ended up doing my screen test. So talk about stress and talk about high standards. Once I got into television, another world had been opened up to me, but sports anchoring was sort of my entry into the industry.
So, it's funny because I think everybody hears of this being discovered moments. I was walking in a coffee shop and somebody saw me. But you actually live that. So it's good to know that for those watching that those things do happen. It's not just a myth that we hear.
I often say to people, people often ask, how do you get into television? What's the best way to do it? And I say, those opportunities will come when you're ready. Being ready is the key, because many people want a platform. But once you get the platform, what are you going to say? You know what I mean? Are you the voice in fashion? Are you the voice in motorsport? Are you the voice in sport? You've got to work and hone that craft, because when the opportunity comes, you'll be ready. As opposed to looking for the platform, and then once that opportunity presents itself, and then you're not
trying to figure it out.
Yeah, you're trying to figure it out, or you're not the key voice, you're not the expert in that space, or you don't have anything unique to offer to that space. Now, in the days of social media, when I started in television, I don't know whether I like it now or not, because I think about the time where I didn't actually have to create content for social media. I could just do my job. Do you know what I mean?
Now it's a whole new
Now there's another pressure to create content, but it's so much easier for those that are trying to break into the industry, that are trying to find a platform, because there are way more platforms than there were when I broke into the industry. So you have to be ready. You have to know what you want, know what you're talking about, know what unique offering you bring to the industry as well.
In all honesty, in addition to that, one of the things I actually really like about your story is we hear it and it's sort of like a throwaway line of be yourself, right? And I think, going to your story, it wasn't just, oh, I need to impress this guy. It's, hey, I love talking about sports. I'm going to sit and talk about sports.
It's true.
And so I think it's that sort of aspect of yeah, we throw that word around a lot, be yourself, but that's what really takes that message across, and that's what really gets the people's attention.
I think you're right. It's the word authenticity, right? We often, I suppose, trying to encourage people to be authentic, and many people actually don't know what it means for themselves to be authentic. I think the first thing that you always have to start out with, perhaps in life in general, is your value system, right? I shared with a friend the other day that I've probably said no to more campaigns and more opportunities than I've said yes, or that have come across, that have come to fruition. Wow. Because if something doesn't align, what's the point of saying yes? And I know it's extremely challenging when, you know, your livelihood is on the line, or you think this is going to be your big break. But I suppose more damage can come out of saying yes to the wrong opportunity. So for me, it's really important. A few years ago, because I work in health and nutrition, and I know we'll get into that, a campaign came along. It was a really large paying campaign, TV, social media, all of that. But it was in the fast food space. And I couldn't do it because it was promoting the food and nutrition aspect of it. This particular brand had certain CSI initiatives which I agreed with and I felt strongly about, and we tried to make it work from that perspective, but their main angle that they wanted to get out of the entire campaign was that their food was healthy to eat. And I just categorically could not agree with that. And I said, I have to say no. And I tell you what, it was one of the most tricky things to say no to because of how big their payday would have been and how big the campaign ended up becoming. But in retrospect, I'm like, how did I even struggle with that? Because the alignment was so off. And other opportunities came because it's like, Stacey, we want to work with you because you're a credible voice. You don't just work with any brand. You don't just say anything to anyone about anything. And I think that's what being authentic is.
No, I actually agree, because you see it. You see it very often with somebody, you know, giving an opinion on something and then the next day advertising something that contradicts it completely. So, and I love the way you put it. It's staying true to your values, staying true to your principles. I think that, again, you know, when we look back and we say, what does success mean to you? People at the end will always say stuff like that, like, I was true to my principles, you know? Not, hey, I managed to get 10 ads with this company and 20 of this, and I made so much here. I think those are the things that actually stay with you at the end.
And they can shift. Part of being authentic is constantly knowing why it works for you or why it doesn't work for you. And if you sit down and you constantly assess that, and I think it applies for any area of our lives, right? Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're trying to break into an industry, whether you're a graduate or you're in at a mid-career level, it's constantly assessing, why do I believe what I believe? And would it change? Why would it change? And constantly being aware of that, because then you can justify things for yourself. Authenticity is saying, I know why I believe in X, Y, or Z. So I agree, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. One of the topics I love talking about on the show, and I feel like maybe we talk about it a bit too much, but is people that pivot in their careers.
Yes.
But what I love about your story is it not necessarily was a pivot. It was that you continuously reinventing yourself, right? Now, obviously you mentioned, you know, started out in broadcasting and TV and sport, and then, you know, the different genres. But then you mentioned here that, you know, you went into more of the health side of things. What was, and as I understand, before I get to that, as I understand is while you were busy with your TV career, you actually went back to study further, right? So tell us a little bit about that. Like, what was that idea behind reinventing yourself?
It's such a good question. When you spoke to me earlier on, I even asked myself, what made it easy for, maybe not easy, but what gave me the impetus or the motivation to do it? And I think I can't take away from the earlier mentioning of my childhood. My dad worked in import and export. That sort of was his main focus when we moved back to South Africa. I was 5 years old. And then shortly after that, we moved to Eswatini. And then I think I went to about 4 primary schools. And when I was 16 years old, I went to Belgium as an exchange student. And I think it's because I became comfortable with change and comfortable with new environments. And it doesn't mean that I don't fear them. It doesn't mean that I don't get nervous or anxious. But if something comes up and I need to just go with the flow, I think I'm more mentally ready and emotionally ready for something that's not set in stone. So when a unique opportunity presents itself, I won't be like, oh my gosh, can I do this?
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think to myself, well, is this a great opportunity? Is this in line with my goals, my visions, my objectives, things that I've always wanted to do? Yes. Okay, cool. Am I qualified for it? Maybe not. Maybe I'll get qualified in the process or I'll improve my qualification. I just go for the opportunity. And I think maybe that's what has allowed me to pivot or allowed me to reinvent myself in tandem with and I suppose complementary with the curiosity. So the reason why I went back to study is I was a straight A student, and then I did this exchange trip to Belgium, which opened up another world to me, because in Belgian schools you don't have to make an academic choice when you're mid-high school. Okay?
Oh, okay. That's
you take every single subject up until matric. The only two subjects that you drop are, I think it was Dutch, because I lived in the French part of Belgium, Dutch and English. So those two additional languages. You take French, you take maths, you take science, biology, geography, everything all the way up to matric. And they believe that that provides a student with the best opportunity when you now have to enter university. You have the versatility. You can make a decision about what you want to be in life. We're kind of forced at the age of what, like 14, 15,
very true.
to decide what we're going to do for the rest. We barely even know who we are at that age, you know? So that set something else in motion in my mind, in that I can be interested in geography, biology, and French and history. Who says I'm either the STEM student or the art student or the history student? So I come back to South Africa, and that's already something that bothers me about our education system.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah. And so I always wanted enough opportunity to allow me to pivot. I just didn't know it was for pivoting at that point in time. So then I did a BCom, and I did great at it, and I worked in sports marketing, and I loved it. But the thing that I always loved about my school subjects was biology. I really loved physiology. And so this thing kept on nagging, you know, like if I read articles about health and wellness and nutrition, I would focus to the more science-based articles. And so a few years ago, I was thinking, well, I'm always studying this stuff. Maybe I should pursue it further. And then when I investigated, they're like, yeah, but you have a BCom degree and BCom honors. You don't have a BSc. Now see how my choices when I was 14 years old affected me all those years later. So I was like, okay, so what do I need to do? And they said, well, you have to go back and do high school maths, high school biology, high school science. And I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's just go with the flow, you know? So I think it's more the attitude that allowed me to reinvent and sort of pivot. And yes, and so I ended up pursuing physiology, and now I'm going to be doing my master's in sports science, and I'm embarking on a study with menopausal women, which is even completely different to the sports academic career that I had before. But to answer your question, it's just constantly remaining curious, but giving myself the space to pivot. I think many people, when I share this story with them, are like, yeah, but you were so much older. I was 20 years older than most of the kids in my class, 20 years older. But I learned from them, and I was able to contribute. So I had to have that mindset, like, so what? Who cares? And I believe it's a thing in Singapore, actually, where it's the rise of the mature student. People in their mid-30s to mid-40s are saying, I did an entire degree, built an entire career on something that I wasn't 100% passionate about. My parents told me to become an accountant, but I was always interested in fashion design. And so those people are going back and studying undergrad, not pursuing postgrad degrees. It's just having the energy, I suppose maybe the childlike curiosity and inquisitive nature to say, why not? Let's just do it.
I would say the courage as well.
I guess, yeah.
I
guess so.
I'm actually I'm smiling a lot because I'm really happy that you're talking about this, because, I relate with it a lot.
Yeah.
And so just a background, I'm actually an accountant.
Okay.
Right? Very, very similar, decided to become an accountant at a very young age.
Yeah.
Realized that I have this, love and passion for speaking and all of that quite later in my campus years. And then by then the die had already been cast. And, that's the way the story goes.
Yeah.
So I'm actually very happy that you sharing this, because I think there's a lot of people there. And that's one of the reasons I always love talking about the pivot, because I think there's a lot of people that might feel stuck in a career and, oh, I've given 30 years to this career, I can't restart now. But to hear these sort of stories, and that's why, we love hearing about them on the show, is because it'll give those people the information, the courage that people have done this. It's not really something unheard of. I'd love to go into this field. Hey, it's not too late. There's people that are 20 years older that are sitting in classes right now and learning. And I think it's just having that positive mindset, the courage, like I said, to take that jump. And
we really have to get rid of the idea that maybe it's a millennial thing, a generational thing, that we were sold, you study, you get good grades in matric.
Yes.
Then you can get into a good university and you can get a good degree, and then once you have the degree, you're going to climb the corporate ladder. Perhaps it was at a young age that I realized that life is way more fluid. Things don't work out that way. And to be fair, I couldn't have done it without the support of my family being like, okay, that's cool. Is that what you want to do? Go ahead. You know what I mean? And when I left my first, I was working at Investec Private Bank, actually, when I got into television. And I went and I spoke to my boss, and this is the power of a good mentor, powers of good leaders around you. So I had my mom and my dad and, other people supporting me. But my boss at Investec said to me, I can totally see you in television. And go for it. In fact, you better go for it. And if it doesn't work out, you come back here. So that gave me the freedom to jump off that cliff and just say, okay, cool. I have somewhere else, I have somewhere to come back to that I enjoy. I loved my job there. It was a great company to work for. And maybe some people are also scared of sharing those inner inklings and desires.
Definitely.
And until you start sharing that, you won't get the support. Someone won't be there to say, what? You'd be brilliant at that. Of course you need to do that, And maybe I think what's become a thing is that people are scared of sharing it with their bosses, their leaders, because what if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
But no risk is ever without, no reward is ever without that risk. So you have to just say, well, I'm going to go and do it. But start sharing your story with people that you can trust.
No, I agree. I think there's a unfortunate stigma that's always been created. And there's that, oh, what will people think?
Yeah.
I'm trying something completely new. I have a family to support. I have this and I have that. But I agree with you completely. Until you sort of say it out loud, number one, to yourself, and then number two, to other people, you'll be able to get that information and maybe be in the position that you were, that you had an amazing boss to be able to say, hey, I think you should go try this.
What was your impetus? I ask questions as well for a living, but I'm now intrigued as the accountant. What was the catalyst? What was the thing that caused the change?
To starting the show?
Well, just to get into the desire for speaking more, having come from the accounting background.
So here's the thing. Funny enough, I was actually at a bit of a crossroads in my career.
Yeah.
Right? It's a very lengthy story. But I actually went for this career counseling therapy session.
Okay.
And this lady was going through and she said, what do you want to do? And the first answer was, I really want to do a podcast. And so whenever I speak about the show, I actually always use the exact same words. Number one, this is honestly a passion project of mine.
Yeah.
But number two, I always say it's my gift to myself, because I was a very similar person. I maybe felt that accounting wasn't maybe the best thing for me and my personality and the way I am, but obviously was very set on that way and, had bills and family and everything like that. And so I kind of always looked at it this way, is that, this was something that I always wanted to do. I'm going to give myself a bit of a present. And a couple of months later, I had it in my head for quite some time. A couple of months later, we started the show, and here we are.
So I guess, that gives me, when you ask the question, like just encouraging people to pivot, I do think there's some value in that. And maybe it's changing. You see that with AI. It really is hard to pursue your passion when you don't have certain things like lockdown. And I know many people give you the advice like, oh, if you don't want it bad enough and you're not going to run after it, then it's not going to happen. But I think the fears are warranted.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the fact that you have family, kids, bills, all of that is warranted. And if you're not 100% sure that you're going to get the support in pursuing something which is a pivot, don't stop exploring what that new thing could be.
Definitely.
And I think that's what allows you that's how the courage is built up. So for example, if someone is a lawyer and they want to get into podcasting or television, channels always need legal insight, but they want lawyers that are able to articulate legal insight for the average audience member, for the public. So get used to speaking about very technical jargon in a simplified manner, because I think people are very specialized and skilled in their area of expertise, but they're not able to make the jump into translating that skill and that knowledge in a distilled manner. And the more you're able to do that, the more people will say to you, oh my gosh, you break these things down in such a nice and simple manner.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about, that's where those have you ever thought about opportunities start presenting themselves. So don't quit your job yet, but as you did, work on these two things simultaneously and then do it as a gift to yourself. I love that. Like you totally said, no, I'm going to give myself the opportunity and the freedom to try something that I love.
Yeah. And I like the way you put it, is in the sense that you don't have to go, and I think that's the problem, is people have that sort of all or nothing mindset.
Yes.
I got to quit my job and go and do this. But no, that's not really the case. It's, okay, yes, let me dip my toe. Let me see if there's a little bit. Let me do a side, the word side hustle is all over the place these days. But it really does do that. Like, that's your sort of entryway. That's your window into possibly another world. And you never know until you try, right?
I mean, I've been listening to so many different podcasts. When I decided to go back and studying physiology and molecular biology and even looking at the sports science, I definitely see where AI is going to replace a lot of the institutional knowledge. And so I did have to make that decision, like, are you really going back to study something that potentially is going to be, non-existent in a couple of years? I don't think in my particular niche and my particular area of study that's the case, but I think it poses both an opportunity and some pause for insight and reflection upon your current skill set, where things don't have to take as long as they did, just a few years ago. Maybe people can say, you can take your current skill set and say, where could I improve it, and how does my current job, my current skill set, my current qualification, what is the bridge to the place where I think I want to be? And I'll give you a great example. My younger brother works in IT. He's an IT project manager. He's always been very analytical and logical in his thinking. The IT space was a great space for him. But we grew up in a musical family. So my dad used to run jazz clubs. He plays multiple instruments. My grandfather played sax. My grandmother played keys. We grew up with a very eclectic taste and sense of music. There was one day opera would be playing Nat King Cole, but also acid jazz. And there's literally no music genre that I'm not like, oh, wow, I actually like that or interested in. And so my brother, loving music and being quite analytical, technical in his thinking, people would think they're separate industries, separate careers, do you know what I mean, separate passions. But he's now a DJ. And music can obviously be very technical. You've got to be very analytical when you learn to read music. Yes. So his bridge, even though he's learning to play classical music now and classical instruments and learning to read music, his bridge was taking that analytical mind and bridging it to music from a DJ, software, production perspective, not necessarily the creative aspects that we think when we think about music. And it was the perfect segue, the perfect bridge. So maybe people need to, if you want to pivot and you think that there is no bridge connecting you from where you currently are to where you want to be, actually explore that. Use AI to explore that. Use whatever tools you have, at your disposal to explore that bridge.
And I love the word you use, because I think AI is becoming a very scary topic for a lot of people, because of the exact point you mentioned. People are feeling like their careers might become obsolete. But the word you used there was opportunity. And I think, yes, it is closing a lot of doors, but it is opening quite a number of them as well. So there is definitely, quite a lot of opportunity out there to, as you say, use your skills in different ways.
This is the opportunity to pivot, because our fear of change is what prevents people from pivoting. It is what prevents us from reinventing ourselves. And so I perhaps again, to go back to your question, what would make me pivot? When something makes me feel a little bit scary, I have a tendency to run towards it as opposed to away from it. Like, do it scared.
Yeah.
Do it with the courage, do it with the boldness, do it with the what if mentality. Do you know what I mean? Because what's the worst that could happen? You already have that skill set. You can already go back and find a job in something that you've already been working in for years.
So why not?
So why not
take the leap?
pursue something
Yeah.
else, you know? So, yeah.
I love that. Hey, before we wrap up, there's a question that I ask all my guests, right? And it's fascinating to see the different responses. But what message would you like people watching to take away from our chat today?
Since we're talking about reinvention and pivoting, I would say it's something that I see in health and wellness as well. I think we live in an era of distraction. There's a lot of motivation out there, sure. Social media provides you with a lot of avenues for insight, to discover new things, but it also becomes extremely distractive and distracting. I don't think people sit down with themselves enough and ask themselves why they want something, why they want to do something, because it's only the why that's going to keep you going the minute you hit the first hurdle, the first obstacle, when it becomes challenging. That's the only thing you can really buy into is your why. So from a health perspective, when someone says to me, I want to lose X amount of weight, I ask them why. You know, is it to fit into a dress? Is it to wear a bikini? Or is it because you have kids and you want to age well with them? Do you want to do sports with them? Like, get a really deeply rooted why for anything that you're doing, because there's so much nowadays that's like, how about you try this? How about you try this? Do you know what I'm saying?
Very true.
And you can feel out of sorts. Go back to writing. Get a journal. I know men don't like to do it. Women have a propensity to do it.
I agree.
Get a journal and just start writing out the things that we spoke about. What is authenticity for you? What are your values? What are the things that you want that you haven't been able to achieve, and why? If you can just journal around that, it becomes a little bit more concrete in your mind. You feel a little bit more present and ready to face something, and therefore maybe that's where your courage and your boldness to make that pivot or reinvent yourself could come from.
No, brilliant. Stacey, I'm going to apologize because I feel like we are going to be nagging you to come on our show many, many more times. So I'm going to say, I'm going to say sorry. I'm going to say sorry in advance because I think we haven't even scratched the surface, but we definitely going to have you back.
You have to interject more because I talk for a living. Maybe my answers were a little bit too long. I loved it.
No, it was brilliant. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
It was such a pleasure to chat to you, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So thank you very much. Perfect. All right, that's our show. I love the way Stacey put it. Let's go back to finding out what's our why. My name is Mohammed Ebrahim Tayob, and you're watching Chat EbT. Until next time.